Hi, my name is Tracy Vallow. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a mathematician. I'm an old guy, and I've spent 40 years thinking about Einstein and physics and quantum mechanics and Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, and basically the fact that nobody was able to come up with a GUT, which stands for Grand Unified Theory, which would put gravity and light and uncertainty and all these things into one great big simple package, one simple rule. I got up this morning and realized that the answer was all around us. I think I've come up with a very simple, very elegant way that explains the whole thing. I can't give you the math. I don't know enough math to do it, but all of this makes a lot of sense, and it's really pretty easy. So I got a little show here to explain what it is. And basically it's billiard balls. Okay, here's the conventional view of the universe, of the grand unified theory as it now stands. There's a bunch of blank spaces and a bunch of stuff. That is to say, there's things separated by empty space. Things are apart from each other in little clumps. The conventional view then is that if you wanted to move something, anything, it moves from point A to point B. I think there's something called a base photon. I can't think of a better name for it, so I made it up. And that the universe is completely full. There is no empty space, much like a rack of billiard balls. If you hit one ball into a billiard ball rack, all of the balls in a line will stay in the same place. It's the one on the end that will move off. So I actually think the universe looks a little more like this. And in that it's completely packed solid with base photons. I don't think there is a photon that moves from the sun to the earth. I think everything is crammed full of photons like this. There is no empty space. In fact, it looks a little more like this. And in fact, really, it probably looks a little more like this. So imagining for a second that everything is completely packed full of photons. There is no base photons. I'm calling them base because I don't think they're really photons. I mean, maybe they are. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. But assuming that the entire universe is just densely packed with these things, like a huge, dense package of racked billiard balls. Then, for example, in the wave duality experiment, instead of having a photon move from the right to the left and hit the screen, what's happening is that the energy is transmitted through all the intermediary photons till it hits the one that is right next to the screen. And bingo, it looks like a particle. On the other hand, if you do two slits, it's moving the energy from one end, from the right-hand side, to the left-hand side. It's hitting the particles that are already there. I'm not sure they're really particles yet, but they're hitting the photons, the base photons that are already there. That scatters out the energy in all directions, just like hitting a rack of billiard balls, and since the energy is coming in two different places, you get interference patterns, just as you would expect. There's a thing called electron pair spin synchronicity, which has been boggling people's minds, and basically it says if you split off an electron into a pair, you can put one on one side of the universe and one on the other side of the universe and change the spin of number one, and number two spins. Why? Well, in my universe it happens this way. It's because everything's packed. It's just back to the old billiard ball routine again. There's recently been something called the Wheeler's delayed choice experiment, which says that if you watch a photon go through a slot, there it is. If you don't watch it, it goes through every slot. How is that possible? Well, in the base photon view, It's because the photons are everywhere, all the time. And you can only see one thing at a time. So yeah, if you're looking at the slot, sure enough, the photon goes through it. Okay, we're going to hold on this last slide now and just talk a little bit, because that's it. That's the idea. Let's take a look at some of the other things. For example, Einstein said that as you take a piece of mass and try to move it towards the speed of light, the mass becomes infinite. That is to say, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it encompasses all the mass in the universe. Well, if you think about that in the billiard ball analogy, it does take some time for the energy to pass from one end of the rack of balls to the other end of the rack of balls. That's the speed of light. If you were to try and move something at the speed of light, piece of mass, well, it'd have to be ultimately a bigger and bigger and bigger ball, because then the energy would move instantaneously through it. So the reason that mass has to increase as it reaches the speed of light is that basically you've got to gang together 2 billiard balls into one, 3 billiard balls into one, 4 billiard balls into one, until you're down to one great big huge giant billiard ball and the little one you're trying to affect on the other side. Things such as planets and atoms and people and so on are not discrete packages that move through otherwise empty space, but instead are local activations of a universe that is packed with base photons. And by local activation, what I mean is it kind of comes back to human beings. The way human being senses work is relatively. We can't ever see anything absolute. We only see things relative to something else. Dark according to light, soft according to loud. That's the way our senses work. They all work in terms of relativity. We can't see anything absolute. What's really going on then is that these areas that look to us like things are really areas that are changing, because change is all that we can perceive with our senses. The area that looks like empty space to us is where things are not changing, which is why it looks like empty space. We are the same way. And in the same sense, when we move through the universe, it's like we're like a standing wave. That is, the particles of water don't go anywhere, but the standing wave moves through the particles of water, just like a wave crashing up on the beach. So I think that's actually what's going on. I don't think there's any empty space in the universe. I think it's all full of these base photons. Well, then you would have to say, if that's the case, the obvious question is, okay, so what are all those planets doing out there, and what's all that empty space in between? And I think I can answer that question. Those are base photons that are not doing anything. They're not changing. And we already have a name for them. We call it dark energy and dark matter. And I think this approach offers a new way to look at the universe and goes a long way to filling an awful lot of holes in an awful lot of theories. That's it. Bye.